welcome to the November/December meeting for the News Charter School Board of Directors. We'd like to welcome Mr. Betterton to his first board meeting, and we appreciate you being here. And it was, as I said, good to be with your family and have you. And we'd like to welcome Naheem, who's the VP for the Student Government Association, so he'll be giving the report out today. Please, to our audience, if you want a nibble, please feel free to grab some food, coffee, drinks, water, whatever, during the course of the meeting, or I will have to pack all that stuff up and take it home. So I'll call the meeting to order, 6 o'clock. And I will read or remind the board of our conflict of interest per NGCS 138A-15E. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Thank you. So if you please review, if you haven't already, the agenda. And I'll entertain a motion to accept tonight's agenda. There are no consent items. Discussion, all in favor, opposed, motion passed. We do not have anyone signed up for the public comment, so we'll move to the approval of our October minutes.
I was made aware of 2 typographical errors in the minutes. I've really never done this before. Do we want to wait until next month to approve them with those changes, or approve the day with the changes?
We can approve them.
Okay, they are. I make a motion to approve them as presented with the exception of Paul Worley's last name is spelled incorrectly and Dave Neville was absent at the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Betterton, do you have a report that you would like to present?
Yes, I do. In your packets, you'll see something that looks like this.
Yes.
Reflecting on my 30-plus years of experience in working with the schools, the school climate is, I think, very important to the success of the school. So, in my 5 days of working here, I've tried to look at that. So I want to present this to you. In my opinion, this is my opinion again with my 30 years of experience, in my opinion, no matter what school you have and what kind of programs you put out there, it will not be successful unless you achieve this that I have here. And that is that you would want your school to be safe, secure, and stable. Those are basic needs of any school. And if you stop to think about it, that's also basic of us. We want to feel safe and secure wherever we are. And I think this school, what I see so far, you've done a fairly good job with the physical aspect of the school, with the security of the buildings. You have to have a pass to get in, and this campus is a challenge because of the way it's situated. You've got this building, and then you have to go to another building, and then you have to go somewhere else. And you do have traffic in and around, and even through the campus. So that presents some challenges, but the people here appear to be on top of that and work hard. As a matter of fact, he came up with a suggestion about changing. We'll talk about that a little later on. So I think from a physical standpoint, I see some real good things here with the challenges. The psychological aspect, you want your faculty, staff, and your students to feel safe and warm and feel a part of it. When I go around, and I've gone around to all the classes at different times, and just poked my head in and sat and listened. I've had some conversations with a number, not all yet, but I will get to everybody. And there's some real strong feelings of this is our school. This is our family here, which is a real positive thing. Sociological, I haven't been able to get to that yet because, in 5 days you really don't see a whole lot of that. Educational, there's a strong desire to do well here. Each teacher that I've had conversations with, they want to do well, they're willing to do what they have to do to get there. I think there's some blind spots that need to be worked with, and there's some other things that I'll talk with you about that a little later on. And then the financial piece, after talking with Katie, Northstar folks, and of course with Rodney, I think you've got a good handle on the finances. And of course, when you operate a charter school, you're operating with about 80% of what the traditional public schools operate on. And of course, we know that with the fact that the legislature has not approved the budget yet, and so we still don't know how much money we have. Actually, we're operating off of last year's budget, and that presents a problem. And so there's some issues out there financially. So we've got to tighten up that budget to make sure that we stay in the black. As a charter school, you can't operate in red very long. A lot of times there are situations where a traditional public school can be in the red and get reprieve. Charter school, no. If you operate in the red, there's nobody out there. There's no safety net.
Right.
You sink or swim. So we want to keep an eye on that. And so I'm working with Acadia. I went last Monday and spent a couple hours with her reviewing the budget, making sure that we're where we need to be. And I would have to compliment this board for choosing Acadia. I worked with them the 15 years that I was at the other charter school, and they're an excellent organization. They will listen and they will work with you, but if you're not doing what you need to be doing financially, they will tell you real quick, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to point this out to you, and as the way I see things, and in my experience, the board sets that climate for the school to operate. And it's important for the board to see the big picture, because that's where the board operates, with the big picture. And then allow the faculty and staff to fill in the smaller parts that makes the machine run. When the faculty and staff feel like that's not their picture, that they don't have that, that's when this stability, and safety, and security becomes a little bit of a question. And you don't want your organization to be like that. So for me, in my time here, I'm going to be working to make News Charter School a place where the faculty, the staff, the students, and parents feel like this is a safe, secure, and stable. Because if you look at some of the trends over the last several years, there's been a lot of turnover. And you really want to avoid that. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm sitting here saying, well, if you've got an incompetent teacher or incompetent employee that you want to keep them on. No, not at all. One thing you want to screen up front and get good employees to start with, and then grow those employees so that they stay with you. Because then you get consistency and stability. And when employees know that that's coming, and they know what's expected, you have a healthy climate. So that's where I am, and what I'm trying to do from my first observations. And there are a couple of other things. I noticed a difference between this board and the board that I'm familiar with. This board is very active, and that is a plus. That's really good. You take ownership, and that's good. I like to see that. There is a fine line between being active and being controlling. So we want to talk a little bit about that, and we can do that a little later. Another issue, I think, I'm not sure, as I talk with different teachers and staff, I'm not sure they're on board with whatever the identity is here. I'm not getting that. So when I talk to one, I get this picture. When I talk to another, I get a different picture. So we need to kind of refocus. What is News Charter School all about? Who are we? What do we do? And how do we do it? And once we get that crystallized, then we need to communicate that to all of our faculty, staff, and parents. So that's one of the things I think we need to do. The facility, you have a nice facility here, of course, and the modulars are serviceable. We'd love to have a nice, beautiful building, but in the charter school world, you don't get that. Because you can't go out and tell the county commission if you want $20 million to build your high school. That's just not there. You have to find your own funding. You know that. So you learn to live with it. And when I go around classes and touring, the teachers aren't doing that. And the students, they don't care. They're just, as long as they feel like they're accepted and they feel a part of the program, they're happy. They don't have to have the prettiest, but we'd love to see that. And I was surprised to hear how many students you had involved in band. You have about 100 students in band. That's great. And when they started up the charter school back in 1996, the idea was to offer parents a choice, something different. I mean, if you're going to do the same thing as to do in the traditional, then there's really no reason for you to be there, other than the fact you save taxpayers money. But you do, you know that. You're saving taxpayers, particularly Johnson County taxpayers, a lot of money. I don't know if you know that, but you are. So the idea is to offer something different. So when I see a nice band and an art program, and the traditional program, they're kind of de-emphasizing that. So I applaud you for doing that. So I think that's a plus. I'd like to see that. I wasn't sure that I could identify, and I haven't been able to identify, what is the vehicle for parents to provide support to the school? A lot of places that have PTOs or PTAs. I understand this one does not have that. I'm not sure what the avenue is. I don't know if this board is interested in that sort of thing, but having parents having an avenue to be able to support the school, both in what they can volunteer and what they can contribute financially, is certainly an avenue.
We do have a parent ambassador group.
Okay. I probably need to find out a little bit more about that.
Yes, but I think it would be great to go to one of their meetings.
Okay. Okay. All right, we'll do that. One of the areas that I think we probably need to look at, teacher salaries. Teachers at Neuse make less than other teachers in Johnson County. And, when you interview a prospective candidate, certainly the atmosphere that you have to offer here is a plus. However, when they go to the grocery store, that atmosphere by much. So, you know, the reality is there. So I don't think you can afford to come up with matching the Johnson County salaries in terms of supplements and everything else. But probably needs to do some improvement in the teacher salary area. And I think those things need to be looked at pretty quickly because next year's calendars and budgets and everything is going to be worked on pretty quickly. So we need to do some real strong thinking about that. Okay?
Did you, I know the survey was completed, did you have any early information from the employee survey, the teacher staff survey?
I looked at it, didn't have a chance to digest it,
Okay.
but if I remember, I can't remember the details.
Right,
You're
okay.
talking about the teacher survey?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I did get a chance to look at it, but I hadn't had a chance to really get into it.
Mr. Betterton, you asked me to remind you to mention something about the county commissioners. You did.
Yes. You know, the local superintendent is asking the county commissioners for additional funding.
Yeah.
That's current expense money. Current expense money comes from charge. So we'll make sure that money doesn't get lost somewhere. I don't know if anybody, if you have any contact with the...
Yeah, we've talked a number of times about, you don't get what you don't ask for. And we've talked a number of times about, we need to go kind of organize and make a presentation about who we are and stuff in front of the county commissioners. We've just not, it's not happening yet.
Well, according to the North Carolina charter school law, this is North Carolina law, you are entitled to the equal amount per child disbursement.
We do track that.
Okay.
We track that part, actually.
Well, I'm saying this is an additional funding
Yeah.
coming from the county commissioners.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
you want to make sure that doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
So that's a certain amount, we need to, that same amount per student. And what fund did you call that continuing current?
Current expense.
Current expense.
Current expense. There are two pockets of money. Capital that they use for buildings. We get zero of that. Current expense, we get a per child allotment based on whatever they spend per child in Johnson County, whether they go to charter or Johnson.
And it actually flows through the county and then they cut us a check.
That's correct.
We monitor that really.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure somebody's eyes was
Oh,
on
no,
that.
and about years ago, yeah, we didn't monitor as close as we should. You're
Okay.
But are you talking about county money or state?
County.
money?
County, this is money coming from the county commissioners.
When this additional money gets approved because of the deficit that the
Yeah.
county's in, we will get part of that.
So it's actually, is that $10 million, is that inclusive of, we're just a little dash in that, but is that number they're showing, is that inclusive of us? They're taking to the county commission?
What the local superintendent will do, he will present his request to the county commissioners.
Right.
And if, let's say, for example, that they ask for $10 million and there's 1,000 children in Johnson County, including charter schools, then you divide that into the 10 million, and that's a per child allotment.
I realize
Then you
that.
multiply.
It's the estimate which he's presenting. So that $10 million to the county commissioners, has he got a line item on there for charter school per child? I'll just
Dr.
wonder.
Howe, no,
No.
that's the county.
It's just a dollar.
So the county would come up and say, they're, by the way.
These are all the
we do
Johnson
this, we gotta get
schools in our
this.
county.
Now, the county doesn't give you anything, he goes to the superintendent.
Right, and they do it. So I would think if the superintendent was giving a very clear, honest picture of the deficit, you'd have to include that as that pro rata amount in there too, so just.
That's the monitoring probably we need to do, because I'm
Right.
not sure that,
If we don't ask
that
for it,
he's worried about.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
We'll remind
He
you.
probably wouldn't, fight it, he would say technically that's true, but I'm not sure that was the part they asked, so that he gets his.
Yeah.
I like
Set them up.
one of the things you mentioned here too, that the impact to Johnston County, and it also comes down to their budget, and then there's a additional impact to economic development in the county. And I think if there's ever some kind of presentation to the county commissioners, that's a good number to start really coming up with and being able to back that up. Not just an estimate, but doing some ciphering and figuring all that out.
Well, if you figure the square footage per child or facility and multiply that by 900 and some children here, that gives you a figure real quick.
Right.
And, of course, Johnson County is growing rapidly. And the Johnson County school system is just having a hard time keeping up with the growth, just like Wake County. Well, charter schools gives the local county commissioners some free because they don't have to pay for that.
So based on, if you have any experience or perspective on this, evident, with the budget the way it is, it's basically these are 2018 numbers that we're running off on continuing statute. Very likely could be operating on that next year at this time.
Depends on politics.
Right, there's an election, so is there any more, going to be any more push to break apart and pass a budget? We could be. I just wonder, what is the cost of the price index? What percentage is that going up for cost while the state funds are remaining flat?
Yep. That's the reality of these, and of course, that's all political, so.
Oh, yeah, but somebody's got to
you
pay
can't
for
figure it out.
that gap somewhere has got to, that's where you get part of the $10 million from and things like that.
Right, but as I used to tell my folks, you can't spend money you don't have.
Right.
So if you don't have the money, you're not spending it.
Exactly.
It's pretty simple.
And I just wanted to make a comment about the teacher salaries in that, with Johnson County schools having their issues, there are quite a few teachers who are nervous and dissatisfied, and I believe that if we were to be a little more competitive, we could possibly recruit folks. I just think it's a prime time to, recruit folks.
If we have it in the budget, we can't spend money we don't have.
As someone that took us out of the red, we definitely have been there when you're right. We were in the red about 4 years ago.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you took
We
steps.
had to make tough decisions, but
That's part of our life, isn't it?
Thank you very much. We appreciate all those comments as well as things that we need to discuss and reflect on. I'm sure we'll be doing some of that with your help and coaching. Naeem,
Naeem, would you please?
did I skip over Naeem? Did I skip over everyone to the director's report? What happens right over my glasses? I'm terribly sorry.
That's all right.
The booster, Naeem will go first, and then, was there someone here from the Booster Club? No.
Naeem,
Okay.
would you spell your first and last name so I have it right for the minute?
The first name is M-A-E-M, and the last name is D-A-E-M.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naeem. I am the Vice President of the student body government here. Tylea is absent today due to a basketball game that she participated in. So I would like to update you guys on the last things that she had reported. So, at the last board meeting, Tylea shared our efforts to raise school spirit around the high school. She told all about the powder puff and what we did and how we plan on collecting canned food and non-perishable items for payment into the kids. Well, I am proud to say that we were very, very successful in our efforts. We managed to collect over 650 items, and around half of those items went to our school's pantry, which we filled, by the way. And SGA and some National Honor Society members took half of what was left and bagged the items to give to about 9 families over the Thanksgiving break. These families were kids from our school as well. The leftover food will be bagged and given to families. Well, the leftover food that we didn't give for Thanksgiving will be bagged and given to families for Christmas break. And overall, the Powder Puff was a huge success, both the event itself as well as the proceeds collected from the event. In fact, students want to make it an annual event, so hopefully we'll continue after Kelly and I graduate. Our next project is Homecoming, which will be February 7th of the upcoming year. We have already been discussing all of the details of the dance, and we also have already been getting ahead with our prom effort. And in fact, we have already decided a theme, seeing as next year will be 2020. We have decided the theme will be the Roaring Twenties. We are excited to be hosting these events and can't wait to keep building our school spirit all around. And Tenlia did inform the SGA members of how Ms. Dixon planned on coming to a meeting and talking with us. So she actually made a schedule so that we can talk about when it is best for you to come. And the executives, which are the president, vice president, and so on, we meet on the second Fridays of each month, and everyone, which is the homeless representatives, meet on the fourth Friday of each month.
Thank you.
And that's all the news from us this month. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. And if not, thank you for listening. And before we continue, I would like to take this time to ask the board's approval on a senior trip, which I believe Talia may or may not have brought to you guys the last time.
Is this the trip? Oh, okay. So here's the field trip.
Okay. So we had suggested or asked that we would like to go to the mountain, and we have a whole itinerary set up if everybody would like to know more. You can see afterward. And we just want to, is there more that I should see?
No. I think we actually have a form to sign, but I know in maybe addressing a little bit of the active versus controlling that we wanted to think about as a board, not only to approve these field trip forms. I think that is a weed that we no longer need to, it said it was required for out-of-state or the country and overnight field trips. Can't quite remember the history of it, of how we got to having to say yes to field trips, but I would entertain a motion that we no longer have to approve field trip forms in any way, shape, or form.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Yes.
I think we have to make a distinction between information and approval.
Right.
Lots of things doesn't need to come for your approval, but information should always come to you because you are responsible and you are the representative out there in the community. So my thinking is this may be approved by the executive director, but the executive director must.
Oh, that's fine. I agree. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so-
That's fine. If we will leave it to the executive director to discern what information needs to come to the board level. And I think this is already signed. So this is going to be effective immediately. So I'm just going to pass this back and hope you all have a wonderful trip in the mountains.
Thank you so much.
In fact, the discussion we had before was we would like a lot of those things where we can, presented at the beginning of the school year that are planned out through the school year, so that it's not these reactive natures, I mean, whatever that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good job. So we did not have an athletic booster club report. You know everything, Robbie, on that? Anything?
Not for
Okay, and so SGA and the director's report. So I'm just going to scoot in a little. This is Ms. Sandora's last meeting, and I certainly want to say, and I'm sure on behalf of the entire board, that we're, yes. nice optics, Mr. Bennett. Very sad, but of course we wish you all the best, and we appreciate all your time, energy, and effort. The late nights, the early mornings, the candid conversations. We appreciate all of that, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
for all
for
your
everything.
support. Thank you.
So now we'll move into committee reports, and I thought it might be good, and Rodney suggested it, but I certainly agree with it, that for executive committee, we had a meeting when we met with Mr. Betterton. Is that the last meeting, really? Yes.
The last one was with
Met with
Susan.
No, I'm sorry, we met with Susan for the transition
Yes.
plan. So, but as the treasurer, not that this is financial information, but Rodney asked to kind of help us recalibrate, make sure we're all working off of the same platform, moving forward on decisions, to do a brief presentation on his above the line. And I think we all agreed to work towards that, and I think that may even address some of Mr. Betterton's comments to help us understand the difference between active and controlling. So just so we can just kind of recalibrate before we go into the new year, he's going to talk a little bit about what that means and to make sure we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, so thanks.
I'm sorry, executive committee going forward, academic, okay.
No, that's not academic committee.
This
This is part of the executive committee as the treasurer.
Yeah, so what has come about a little bit, just kind of for everybody and on recording too, was Mr. Betterton had some questions about some of the financial stuff, and we were talking about it, and we paused for a second to kind of talk about, the board's view and the strategy, and we had some discussion about, what is the board's strategy, right? And it was kind of a point for me to reflect, like, I felt like we've had a strategy as a board because we've had meetings, we've had discussions, we voted for the last year and a half, and so it was kind of a point of reflection for me, which said, well, maybe I don't know that we've actually documented it well enough so that it's actually consumable, that it's consistent, and as we go into the stage of the next chapter of News Charter Schools, journey, is I think it's going to be really important as we go into this executive director search and recruiting, so that we really put our best foot forward in our expectations, and that starts with who we are, how we work, and then what do we stand for. So I actually went back and pulled, Paul had sent this out, it was about a month ago when we had some early discussions about, from the Office of Charter Schools and some of their governance training documents. And I just pulled a couple of slides because there's a couple of points that I want to touch on as we go through our discussions and what we talk about above the line here and what we make decisions on. I think it's really important that we put it in context. So, when we look at set the mission and vision of school, we've talked about this a lot, right? Do you go hire somebody that comes and tells us what we want to be, and then we hold them accountable to it, or do we need to be, as a board, we set that vision, and then we go recruit somebody that's going to help us get there, the how part. And so I think it's really important we remember that. Analyze and evaluate academic success. I think we're making progress there, right? We've actually got some academic targets. We set some last year with school report card. There's a set of measures that we've actually recorded this year. And then giving clear direction to the school directors as we go through this process is being really clear this time around about when we go out to recruit somebody, that we're very clear of what we expect them to accomplish. What are the outcomes that we want? It's not just about the activities of the school, but what are the outcomes that we're going to hold them accountable for, 6, 12, 18, 24 month, 3 to 5 year plan, ever how we want to do it. But I think that's something we have to really spend some time on as a board, so that we have a clear message and we speak as one voice about it. And so I thought it was interesting as I went back through the slides that in my mind about strategic planning and documentation and report. Nicole, you've had comments before about have we really followed through on our strategic plan? Have we communicated it? Have we documented it, right? Is in the board committees, in the deck, I didn't see it the first time around, it actually recommends we have a strategic planning committee, of which we don't have. We've never had one, right? So I guess as I reflect, it shouldn't surprise me that we don't have strategic documentation because we've never had somebody accountable to do that. And so the other slide here is when you break apart these roles and responsibilities, control versus govern, whatever flavors, you want to use of that vocabulary. It was important to me to actually realize about whatever it is we say we want to do is how we're going to measure it and how we're going to hold the executive director accountable to get us there. And that's really important. And then lastly is when you look at this why, what, and how much, when I looked at the deck, this really hit home with me. We have the responsibility to answer why we're doing what we're doing, what it is with clarity and precision so that everybody understands we all speak the same language, and then how much. And how much, I think there's a timeline vision of that we've never really set on a timeline. So this was And then this is kind of as you go down into the weeds or below the line, this starts to talk about the kinds of things and who makes what decision. So that's just the slides, but sorry if I'll step away from that, I'll try to talk over. I'm a visual person, so I had to see the big picture. And as Mr. Bedington and I talked a little bit about the board strategy, I kind of realized, I think we've kind of lost sight that we have approved certain things, and we made some decisions for that above the line. So when we think about the why and what's in the charter, right, it's defined in the charter of why we're here. We voted on the what, that we're going to be excellent at preparing college-ready graduates. We as a board had discussions, we had input, we went through and voted on that one. And then just recently, we actually voted on measures that was presented by the executive director. It was like 16 or so in the thing. So when I put the green check marks, I have to reflect back, we actually voted on these things. I put a question mark behind the how much or the why. We never really discussed or voted on that. So at some point I feel it's important we should, because we could say, this is why we're doing it, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to measure it. But you need to put some time frames associated with it, because whomever's taking the role of executive director, that we're actually hiring to get this done with us, right? There needs to be some timeline associated with it. The red line is what I kind of use as terminology above the line and below the line in governance for us. And I think we should each challenge ourselves as we bring things forward like a field trip. Is that really above the line discussion that we as a board should be having and approving? And we approved the framework of a strategy that was presented to us by the executive director. And that, if we remember right, that was out of the retreat we had last summer. There were pillars of the strategy around academics, culture, and operations. And then all the things below that line, from an operational perspective, that executive director is supposed to go carry forward. It's the next level details of that plan that we got the first revision of it. I shared it with Mr. Bedington, that document that Susan had presented. We shared it in the classroom in the board meeting that time. And that was going through some sets of revisions with additional input, et cetera, et cetera. But as we look forward and we look at our committees, our decisions, or whatever, I think we really need to kind of take a step back as a board and say, the executive director's responsibility is to do all this stuff below the line. Not actually do it individually, but get it done and be held accountable. And we've got to hold ourselves above the line. And so I feel like over time that I've been here in 8 years, and I've personally done it, and I'll use fundraising as an example. I'll use myself. That was a below the line thing that we did because for various reasons, capacity, knowledge, experience, whatever, it wasn't getting done above the line. So we did below the line. And looking back on it, probably what we should have done was just stopped it and actually not done it, because I think it may have caused more problems than it helped. So I just think that's a perspective as we look at the big picture of things, as we move forward in this new journey. I think it's really important that the board gets this work moving really quickly, because the timelines for our search to go into the spring, I mean, it's already like fixing to be, Christmas time and the holidays. So with that being in mind and referencing the charter school, we can do it in new business, but I think we should actually formally form a strategic planning committee whose first charter is simply to put what we voted on and approved in a board in some type of documented format that we use, because we don't have it. I mean, I felt kind of bad when I talked to Mr. Bedington. I didn't have anything to hand him. It's just me getting on a whiteboard and drawing something like this. So I think it'll help all of us to kind of speak with one voice if we do this. And then from this, I was talking to Vinci on the way here, because he had had some things about the job description, is once this is articulated, a job description would actually articulate what the role would look like for the ED, with the expectation that they get this done, and how we set their goals and objectives for them. So when we say above the line and below the line, if I say it, I'm going to use it for my vocabulary from now on. When I say above the line, what I'm saying is for board governance, these are decisions and discussions up here. And we have to be very careful that for the ED, all these things down in here around the primary, intermediate, senior academy, whether it's culture, technology, compensation, all those things, that really needs to come from the ED as a recommendation to us. And as part of the whole package, I feel like sometimes we talk about little things in pockets, and it's very hard for some of us to connect dots because it's a point here and there. And I know personally, I'm a big picture guy, so if you pull this lever and it pushes that lever, and we've not even talked about those levers, I have a really hard time making decisions. So as we think about the whole strategic plan and the top priorities, which there have some that have come to the board from administration, that we'll talk about a little bit in finance. We've got to talk about what are those priorities, where did they come from, how do they relate to the outcome, and then how are we holding that ED accountable, that whatever we say we're going to do and how we measure it in the timeline, that's the conversation we need to spend more time on. So, thank you for entertaining that for a few minutes.
Comments, discussion, thoughts? I felt there was a recommendation in there for a
Strategic planning.
strategic as a standing committee.
But technically,
we have to change
technically, it has to be
that.
ad hoc for right now, because you can't do it in standing committee, right?
Until
Because
we-
that's in the bylaws.
Right, we would have to do bylaws, but we're going to be soon doing that.
Okay.
Well, I would say an ad hoc one for now, to start to help us through this ED documentation and planning process, because somebody's got to do that work.
And I would support the idea of ultimately having a standing committee, because if you do the work of a strategic plan, it should not be a one-time snapshot in time. It should be a living, breathing document that is, my recommendation would be like a 3-year rolling strategic plan. So as you go through the year that you're in, you're looking 3 years out and planning for that, so that you always have 3 years ahead. You can do 5 year, but to start, I think that would be a pretty big thing. But I feel like we need, if we're going to do it, it makes sense to me to make it a standing committee ultimately when we revise the bylaws. And I think it would help us stay on track and maneuver as we continue to sort of figure out who we are.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, as I said earlier, I don't care what kind of plan you do up here, if ED and below are not safe, it's not going to get done. And if that's changing, every year, every other year, it's not going to get done. Susan may have done an excellent job, but here I come in new, got to start off ground one. Now, she may have some stuff that's written down, but I haven't lived it. She lives it, and that's important. So I think that's why we got to step back and make sure that this is a safe place for people to invest themselves and create an environment that's going to be here for a while. That's my sermon.
I think that a strategic plan can work to support that, because I think a lot of the change that we've seen, I've been here for 5 years, but I think a lot of the change that I have seen has been because we knew that we needed to do something differently, but we didn't necessarily have a plan for what that would be. And I think if you have a strategic plan that any organization lives by, that gives you that stability, because you know not only what you're doing now, but what the plan is moving forward. And you should never outrun your strategic plan, right? So you should never get past what you have written down as your goals. So I think it would really support what you're saying.
And I definitely think we should have a strategic planning committee, and I do think it should be a standing committee. My concern, and when I think about strategic planning, I think of a long-term plan, and then but we also have some short-term issues that need to be addressed rather quickly, as far as identifying what we want in an executive director and what that job description is going to look like. And then, so Rodney, I kind of just wanted a little clarification. We're talking about developing a strategic planning committee. Is your first order, we have our strategy here. Is your first order of business to develop a strategic plan? Because I don't think we have time to do that.
No, I think we're doing this in concert.
Yeah.
And as we do it at the same time, one's going to actually influence each other. It's going to be a relationship between the two, because the strategic plan could ultimately start telling us what type of person or what kind of job description we need, or what type of person, personality, skill sets, and so forth.
And shouldn't part of the strategic plan be developed by the executive
That's what I was
director?
gonna say,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. I think it shouldn't be a one-way street for, certainly. I mean, you want to have the
What
engagement.
did you say, Nicole?
Shouldn't part of the strategic plan be developed by the executive director?
I think in concert with the.
In concert,
absolutely, right, yeah.
That's right, I mean,
Should
that's
be a
right.
part of that committee.
Because a part of the strategic plan is implementation, and that would be all executive director, correct? And they would create that plan. I'm just trying to get this all.
Well, so here's the thing we have to remember. And I actually drew a graph for him of board involvement, DB involvement, and it almost looks like a DNA spiral over the last 4 to 5 cycles. Is that there are certain things in these columns that can be defined that are at the board level. Let's just use academics as an example. If we set measures in our overall goals around academics that apply here, in some type of collaboration with an executive director, but there may be other measurable goals that are set within this pillar of the strategy that frankly we have no decision over. I don't know a good example, but do they take more of this extracurricular or that one or whatever? Or what instructional strategy they use in the classroom or whatever, that's that person's decision in consultation with them to make those decisions. So until you actually get down into point case examples, you can't really test out an understanding of this. This is conceptually something that we can start to talk about. And then we can take up a point example. I'll use compensation as one since Mr. Betterton brought it up. I've been through every variable of compensation that this is where we, the board, basically helped define one, because at the time there was nobody here to do it, to somebody else just does it. But at the end of the day, if in a compensation plan that is brought as part of a bigger plan to this board by the executive director as a recommendation to us, we should ask ourselves, is it fiscally affordable? Does it get us in any trouble? But all the mechanics of how do people react, how do people feel if it's everybody gets treated the same, or is it performance-based, or this is the tiering structure of bonuses, or what, all those things, that's not our decision to make. Because at the end of the day, that person has to manage the environment, the culture of whatever proposal they bring forward. And we have to be comfortable with that. I may not personally agree with them. I've gone on record before saying I believe you need some performance-based portions of the compensation plan. But if the ED says, I believe that hurts the culture more than it helps it, because people are like, why do they get it, why that, they can't manage it, and that's what they recommend, then we've got to be comfortable and say, okay, that's your recommendation, it's fiscally affordable, so we'll support it. However, with whatever is recommended, and we go on record one with a plan, the objectives that we set for the measurable goals are non-negotiable. You can't have all this stuff and not miss the targets that we set for that person. That's accountability and oversight by the board. And I think over the times we've kind of done this across the line, and I'm stepping out for myself even personally and saying, let's hold him up here. And the recommendations that come with this new person coming in, whatever these things they want to do down here, we'd say, all right, if they seem logical, don't get us in trouble, they're legal, and don't think they're really bad. But be very clear that these goals that we set and these timelines in support of what we voted on is our strategy. They're non-negotiable.
One comment I have, I think this is understood. I feel like when we talked about this, maybe we came up with a strategic vision and a goal of where we want to be. But there's got to be a plan that holds that up. That's like a roof. Or a structure. There's got to be some kind of substructure that holds all that up, and that's the plan.
Well, and I don't think we
figured out how to build that substructure to hold up that, superstructure of a strategic plan. And I think that's what you're talking about with what you opened up with. That's part of what holds that up.
That's what they do.
Right.
Well, so that's why it just hit home to me as I talked to him for a second. We did do some of this. We actually did that. We set the top of the house, or whatever how you want to do an infographic of strategy. But my point is, as a board, we need to have a statement that everybody understands that this is what the board stands for, this is what we're holding the institution accountable for. That's our job when we hire somebody. When they come in here, they need to understand that we as their boss, this is what we expect, these are the timelines we expected, and here's how we'll hold you accountable and assess it. We need to be consistent with that, and we've not done that before very well.
So yeah, yes, I agree with that. And I think, Paul, to what you were saying, I think we have a strategy and we have some strands within the strategy, but we do not have a strategic plan as a strategic plan is defined, right?
I totally agree.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we can't develop a strategic plan from this. What we need, and yes, the specifics of how it will be implemented, that needs to be done at the ED level and below the line. But determining, I think like any other committee, the strategic planning committee could work on defining these so that we have, you know, with a strategic plan, you have goal, you have mission, you have vision, you have all of those things, and right now we have these 3 pillars, we're calling them, but you have to be able to define what's going to happen within those pillars, and then from what those goals are within each pillar, then that's where you get what are the steps that you're going to take to implement that, and that's what needs to happen below the line. The other thing that I would say is that to be able to do what you're talking about, holding the ED accountable, we've got to be very clear, and this goes back to your diagram on what our mission is, which I think we've got a pretty good handle on and a good start on, but that clear expectations, we've got to know exactly what our expectation is for that ED, for that role, not that person. That role, what are our expectations for that role? What are the job responsibilities? What are the outcomes that we are going to be asking for? And how are we going to measure those? And we have to have that in place in order to do a good search. And so that's what I think what you're getting at. And so when you're talking about doing them in tandem, I think we need to define this more in order to get to what the expectation what we think the expectation should be for the ED. But I don't think you have to get all the way into the weeds of the strategic plan to get there. But we do need to have very clear expectations, and we also need to make sure that the expectations are defined, are put into the job description, and then that is then made clear for the evaluation. That we are going to be evaluating our ED based on the expectations defined in the job description, which flow from the overall expectations of the board.
Yeah, so
they
the
realize that those pieces are essential functions that they must fulfill.
Exactly.
And I think that part of it is almost like the what, and then there's a part of it that's the why, and then the how.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a why that needs to be further fleshed out, I think.
Absolutely.
And even, so in talking to Benji for a second, I called him because of an HR question about what's the meaning of a job description. When you look at a job description, there's, in a job description, you almost never see any kind of measurable goals because those change based on your role. A job description should transcend those. So at the beginning of a year or beginning of a contract, we should, just like we did with our teachers, we said to our teachers, if you don't meet these school report card rates as an institution, there's no bonus pay. That's what we voted on and said. We need to take the same approach. It shouldn't be us to the teachers, it should be us to the ED of how we're going to compensate them, how we're going to measure, all those things for us.
So that was in the contract. You're just talking about different specifics. There were deliverables and measurements. In Simpson's contract. You're just switching it out.
That's right.
To maybe things are more targeted.
Yeah, so however you define it, whether you put it in a job description, which you're right, it's not typically there, but or in an evaluation or in the contract or whatever,
it was in the contract.
Right, but there's a difference between your overall job duties, and there's always a clause in all of their duties as assigned.
Yeah.
There's a difference between that and evaluative measures that you were going to be using. So typically you come up with targets and you sit down at the beginning of each year and you talk about what the targets for that year are, which is, where you link it back to the strategic plan and you make sure that because those targets may change as you go.
So to answer your specifically, Nicole, to me, Rev 0.1, not even Rev 0.0, is that we first need to get down on paper what we voted on before, so that we all look at it and say, do we agree to it? I mean, that's the starting point. I mean, to me, it's stuff we've discussed for a year and a half. We've discussed, we took input, we voted on it. If we're still debating now,
What do you mean by document? Do you mean like on?
if I walk to Mr. Barrett and say, here is the board level documentation of our above the line expectations in like one document, I shouldn't have to tell him, go look at the meeting minutes for the last 6 months.
Send us all the document. So are you saying we take what she created and make it ours as a board document?
We should have a board version for our executive director.
Right, but this should also be embedded in the culture of the school. This is what we
Sure.
And that's what I'm.
Remember, you said those examples.
When you and I talked about, we had a strategy, and I said, no, we didn't, because I never felt like that we actually implemented anything. Because when you look at we were looking at the website this afternoon, there's all this other kind of messaging. Our messaging is so unclear, we're just kind of all over the place. But in regards to, we have been through lots of administrators and lots of executive directors, and that's my greatest fear, is that we do this again. And I don't think we're going to change anything until we fix. Number one, give them clear expectations, and make sure they are realistic, real expectations. I'm not an educator, I'm not an executive director, and I feel like we need a little outside help to figure out if, we're going to reinvent the wheel again and it's not going to work because it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's fine to set goals, it's fine to set targets from our perspective, but you're exactly right. We need somebody to help us with that. Even our units of measurement that we do, as the state shifts and all, if we just put in there, we want to be at A or B rated school. If the unit of measurement shifts, and then that's unreachable or whatever, or maybe it is very attainable, you have to understand that. Rodney, in my world, it's about numbers, right? We either meet that goal or we don't for businesses, and so we need some help. We need some help.
Well, reaching state goals, test or whatever, it's like hitting a moving target. Because several years ago, the school where I was, we were up in the 90s, and they readjusted the scale scores, and we dropped 15 points in 1 year. Not because the kids were not there, but because they changed the scores, moved the target. That happens. And then, of course, the next year, they changed the math program completely, and everybody's scores went down. So, that happens.
But those are explainable.
Well, I know that. So, I guess
it's the ones that it hasn't changed and we still go the wrong direction.
But I think what you need to get to, the measurables that you measure, and I applaud you for doing that, but you need to do that. People need to be held accountable. However, you want to make sure your measurables are what you want to measure. Sometimes people go after the wrong things, and you end up, you've got to go back and, why do parents put their children here? Why do they put them here? And look at things that can measure why they put them here. So that at the end of their 12 years or 13 years here, you have measurables that coincide that. I'm not sure that parents put their children here to get a test score.
No.
So, test scores are fine, but if that's your objective, I think you're missing the point.
So one thing I will say on the record is, I forgot to mention, we actually went through a board and defined graduation competencies. that we said when we would say it, when a student walks across that stage, we are all confident that they are excellent at the 4 graduation competencies that we defined. So we started down the path of putting an assessment infrastructure in place that we thought, and I thought, was above and beyond anything that the state with EOGs and EOCs, that our students would be more well-rounded. It was embedded within those competencies. And we were working towards figuring out how will we assess those competencies. That was the Incubation Plus, which never got completed. So you're right. So we did, it's important to have this conversation for me personally, because I feel like we had those discussions around competencies and these skills that somebody would have graduated, and we got into talking about how we measure them, and we never completed that. That one never got completed. So then it's like we're on to the next version of it, or the next version of it. Now we're at school report card. Now we're at another list that came out of committee. I mean, we got to spend more time talking about that so we're all on the same page.
Okay, so let me just, because I think what we're doing is the conversation you would have within strategic planning committee. So we did have a recommendation on that, initially ad hoc until we changed the bylaws to make it standing. And I mean,
I'd like to make a motion that a strategic planning committee be created, or a strategic planning task force be created with the intent of becoming a long-standing committee.
okay. A second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. So what I would encourage, we need someone to lead that committee, but what I was going to say is I encourage that to be a well-rounded committee. It cannot just be us. And I think we need to look to representation from the community. There's so much information that should actually go into your strategic planning that I'm not sure that we get that information. We should be having a teacher on the committee. We should have an administrator. We should have community people and so forth, so that parents, so that we can use all of that data in creating the strategic plan. So we have a strategic direction, kind of know what the end statement is. And so the committee could work on filling that out. Do you have a comment?
Yes, for the change of the bylaws, we will have to add, when we add into the committee, and I may need some assistance with this, because we have to develop a purpose statement
Right.
for the committee shall, and then appointments and composition of the committee.
Yes.
That's one of the bylaws.
When are we on schedule to do that? Is that a specific timeline for that, or we can just do that whenever, for the bylaws? We just
I would like to have the bylaws updated by January board meeting.
This January? Oh, wow, you are ambitious. You got to see, I like you. I mean, are there some major things
It's not,
that?
It's not a lot.
It's not a whole lot.
That's what I
It's
thought.
not a whole lot. It's I've actually, myself, have gone in and redlined some items and changes that need to be made already.
Because I got a couple of recommendations. I didn't know that you guys wanted the timeline for that.
Well, let's,
So if someone has ideas or suggestions they want to email, please.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, but does everyone have the last, like,
Can you resend that?
revision? Because I think sometimes we work off of wrong
Yes, so what I can do, I can email
versions.
out.
Okay,
I'll send out my redline version.
okay. And so then let's look at by the January meeting, or you want it before then?
The committee, the information.
The comments back.
Comments for that particular committee. You mean for the whole, off of the entire bylaws, or you're talking about just for this one committee?
No, for off of the entire bylaws, do you want that feedback prior to, or can we bring it to the January meeting?
January meeting will be fine.
Okay, and so at that point, Rodney, would you like to take the lead to come up with purpose statement and the,
I'll draft it and send it out for people to comment.
yes, okay, so then by the January meeting, so if you have any
And
comments.
I can plug it in as a redline addition.
Yes. But in the meantime, if you have any comments and so forth on either the bylaws or the development of the committee, then we need to get that in so that by January meeting, we can be close to a final.
Can we share these bylaw documents? Can we share it online so we can see each other's comments kind of in real time? I don't know what to do. I know, but we do that all the time with Microsoft, but I think you might be able to do it.
Yeah, Google
Yeah,
Docs.
but do it where we're, if we can edit that way, if he makes, I don't spend time trying to make the same suggestion one of these folks do, and they can see that, and also we can see, we can go back to the past versions of it.
Just keep it separate in case it gets documents ruined.
And Brad knows probably how to do all that, to make sure there's a seed document that we
Yeah.
don't
You can see.
He's got
I might be able to build
Notes, yeah.
Suggestions instead of editing, that would be important. If you edit it, you can't
Yeah.
see the progression, but if you do suggestions, you can see who's suggesting. In Google Docs.
Okay, so we can do that in Microsoft Word also.
Yes.
Yeah, but you'd have to
That's track
host it,
changes.
you'd have to host it on OneDrive, you could not host it on a Google site. We're getting into, we went back way below the line, back below the ports and the lines. So if we just all edit off the same document is what I asked, not share all these around.
So what, I guess we don't need to be editing the document though.
No, that's what I'm saying. Just do-
I just need comments.
Comments.
I can do it in suggestions.
Some touch with documents.
Use Google Docs, anything that might be a school record, I need to be able to archive.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So he would host it.
Yeah, so, just so I'm clear, I mean, can we go ahead and form the ad hoc committee to start working on at least the initial draft? Because this ED process is really concerning to me, because we can't wait to January, go into February for, I mean, we're running out of time.
I'm talking about for the bylaws, for it to be updated.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just saying, for the ad hoc committee, can we go ahead and form it and like, no, we don't need everybody in the sun involved in the first draft of documenting what we've already voted on, so that we have a draft that can start to see this ED documentation.
Yeah, I'm still go ahead and, I'd like to make a motion to have Jane Jackson chair that strategic planning committee. And then she can go ahead and,
The ad hoc.
yeah, ad hoc.
Okay. Second, for the motion, second, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. Oh, I guess we should have asked you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, but just to be clear, and we don't necessarily have to do this right now, but I'd like to know, I mean, I think it would be hard to get as broad a representative
Quickly, I'm sure, but
sample, like maybe what we can do is aim for that when we do the
Get the
the standing
That's right.
committee and have a smaller group work as an ad hoc, as long as everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. So Naheem, I'm gonna give you an opportunity to scoot out on a school night if you need to, but you are more than welcome to stay for the rest of this 10-minute conversation.
Thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much.
Contribution.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to you being a part of that strategic plan development.
Oh.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
should have SGA, yes.
Yeah.
Pass that on to your friend.
See what happens, you come and sit down one time and you get volunteer for all
Okay, so we'll, any other comments or questions for, regarding executive committee? Okay. So academic affairs, we have a meeting coming up to Thursday. And so where we're going to be reviewing primary academy, and just that will be Ms. Andora's last committee meeting. So we're going over some things just to make sure that we're set during the transition. We also will be talking about meeting recommendations. We have been meeting every other week, and so we haven't had a meeting. We put a little pause on that, and everybody is rethinking that, as well as meetings that will be public meetings, as we've been getting more participation with parents, and some working meetings, which may be during the day, so that there's some stuff that there's less discussion and more working on. So, and I would assume that at that meeting, we could also get some initial survey results having to do with academics.
Yeah, question. I guess I am invited to all those.
Oh,
meetings?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, finance?
So not a ton of updates here in that the budget is still the same because we were waiting for the state budget. There was some discussion going around about, there was one unexpected expenditure that we're all aware of that we will budget for. We didn't budget for originally. That will be included. We had plenty of money to cover that. There was they have a spreadsheet where they track all the salaries of the people and the positions and the roles and some of the changes between the school front office and Acadia. There was an error in the spreadsheet where one of the salaries for one of the roles wasn't included. So we've got a documentation of those 2 to 3 things that we're going to make adjustments for that big budget. The big wild card in the mix is the state budget. And so what Amanda, I feel, did was kind of went back and reforecasted the budget on a 0% ADM change in the per student allotment. If that's the case, we're really riding on flat, meaning we won't have a lot of surplus at the end. We could even potentially be in the red, depending on how some things would swing. But I feel comfortable that we can make some pretty small tweaks, and we're not going to be in the red for the whole year. But it doesn't leave a lot of room for a lot of excess spending either until we get a clear picture of that. So the budget before you, procedurally, we need to just approve that. There's no changes to it from last month, and then I got a couple of points I just made.
So Rodney, you said that salary is now captured?
No, it's not.
It is not, okay.
When we do an update, we have a budget tracker. When we make those changes, we're not just going to make that one by itself. There's 2 or 3 things that need to be made and adjusted, and we were hoping a state one would come in and give us our ADM, so we just do it one time. If we don't get the state number by January, we will go ahead and make those other adjustments so that we have an accurate as of what we know in January.
Tweaks you have to make.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. We'll bring the budget tracker with the changes that were made.
So I move that budget be approved as presented.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
Okay, just a couple of other points I want to make just for awareness for everybody. Kind of to this point about the big picture and all the various things. There's a number of things that have come forth to the Finance Committee from a couple of different channels: academic affairs, facilities, administration, etc. And I feel like we kind of talk about these things in pockets, so let me put it in perspective for a second. Based on the priorities list that Susan had kind of, not priorities list, she had put together a list of things that basically that all in kitchen sink of all the things that might be done, right? And we never got to the point of actually whittling that down to a priority list with dollars associated with it. And the administration with Brittany, and this is before you come on, Mr. Redfin, is Brittany and Amanda and Nikki had sat down and went through and looked at that list, pulled up a section of priorities, and put some dollar figures associated with that. That was that document that I sent out to the whole board to see. I just want everybody to make sure we remember it, is that there was when you look at the technology ask, it was around $168,000. There was some requests for text in the classroom, which were about $20,000. There were some intervention services, staff support that they felt like they needed to really close some gaps in student learning really quickly in some targeted areas. They put a price tag of about $60,000 on that one. And then they had that big item of the salary, anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000. If, I asked Amanda Highfield this yesterday, if you were to bring all of our staff to the county rate with the supplement, their supplement varies from 10% to 13%, depending on years of service and some other things. Our current run rate salary is right around $4 million, so it would be in the neighborhood of about $400,000 annually. I mean, that's the numbers from those salaries. So they had put a range of 2 to 400. If you look at those things, Amanda said it would be roughly, when you go all in, it would be about $400,000. factoring benefits and retirement, et cetera. That's some of the numbers that have come as a request, you know, in these various areas, and there's academics, there's operations numbers in there. So no decisions were made, those numbers are just starting to come in. So at some point, we're gonna have to look at this whole picture holistically and say, you know, ideally below the line, this would come from an executive director that said, here's the bets I wanna make, and also, here's where I'm suggesting we cut, or reduce, or whatever those things are. That really needs to come as a plan from the executive director as a package. I've kind of started to feel like in finance committee, it's been a little bit of, like, it's depending on which one comes and when, and we're out of sync, and nobody can really make a decision, and people get frustrated. The reason it's frustrating for me as treasurers, it's hard for me to say, make this one, but we can't answer the other one. So that's just something I think we're going to need to think through as a board, financially as we look forward. And then the last thing I have is, there was a request for from the executive committee about the the actual role makeup of the committee, the voting rights, all that other stuff. So I worked with Dawn, I had the proposal to send it to the staff. The committee makeup that was recommended based on the executive committee's input was that we had some community involvement. Actually, Will Mitchner is somebody that had reached out to me back 6-8 months ago about if there were any opportunities to people engaged. He was willing to do it. I put a short bio in the document about Will. I don't have any ties to Will personally. I just met him through the school with some of his involvement here. We were looking for a CPA accounting person. I was really hoping to get, you know, some female representation from a diversity perspective, as well as hopefully even some minority representation. Oh yeah, I'm saying, yeah, I mean, we can always get an appropriate person, right, with the right skill sets, but I was just saying from a diversity perspective, if we could get some broad representation, because that's something we kind of struggle after in school from an inclusion perspective. So if anybody's got any names or recommendations for somebody with some heavy CPA and accounting experience, I think we could benefit from that, because sometimes I feel like we're talking about some accounting stuff with Jay Sharpner's guys may have to go back. It'd kind of be good to have somebody in the house for that. So
Does that have to be?
that's the reason I brought it, because this was the whole discussion about.
Is this different than what's in our bylaws?
No.
He didn't put that in yet.
No, so when you go look, remember, this is a discussion that we had before with the Resource Development Committee. There was a request that all the standing committees, remember that with the input about the roles of the executive director should always be, so that there was continuity no matter who was here. I'm just
You
simply.
had to present your membership.
That's right. I'm just
I
following through what was.
I just remember us talking about our membership, I don't remember.
This part at the top is just out of the bylaws. There's no change in this. I literally copied
The
it.
committee shall is in the bylaws.
That is copy and pasted straight out
Okay,
of the
I got
bylaws.
you.
Oh,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
here.
Yeah.
We did, everybody should have done the purpose statement way back.
That's right. This is straight out of the bylaws. I just copied it out of it, just as a reference.
So Ronnie, let me ask you something. So like Benji now comes to that, would he still be coming to that because you may decide that you don't want to be treasurer? Or there's somebody in this board that's going to be a treasurer next year?
Yeah,
So
so
you have to,
Everybody can come to any meeting. These are voting members of the committee, so anybody can come.
because this year, I mean, even, we know there's been times whenever people have said, you know, I may step away from this position. There has to be somebody that.
Yeah, anybody can come, for learning purposes,
Yeah.
but.
from a succession planning perspective.
Yeah, when we are approving the member list, those are the people who can vote. That's why everybody had to give their member
Do
list.
you ever vote on anything?
Well, no, that was actually part of the reason we actually, if you remember right, this is part of the reason we started doing this, was because we weren't voting, because it wasn't clear of what was the official membership of the committee to actually do the voting. I honestly don't know.
Should you all be voting on things?
Well,
I'm just thinking.
They vote on a favorable report. The committee votes to provide a favorable report to the board, moving forward.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you, I'll be very, to me, this needs to change in how this operates from what we've done in the past, because I think back about one of the changes, recommendations I'm going to make in the bylaws is, like facilities as a committee, the off-charge we recommend, that needs to be a standing committee by itself. The reason it was actually an ad hoc committee of finance before was because me and Dave Neville were doing all the work. I mean, that's how that whole thing transpired in those early days. It's just me and Dave, we were doing both, we were both here. So, well, really, it's become such a big part of what we are. It probably needs to be a standing committee by itself.
Listen,
I'm just,
hold real quick on bylaws then, because we're talking about January meeting. It would seem to me if there's substantive changes in the bylaws,
yeah, that's what
they
I'm
need to be discussed and put on the table for consideration.
I don't think you're saying
Not
vote in
just-
January.
No.
I thought you said voted. I mean,
Yeah,
oh,
we
that's
just
what
wanted
you
all
thought.
all the comments in.
Yeah.
So you'll have it present for comment discussion. That's great. Good.
So that is something I think for, and also one of the things I really want to make sure we do a better job is in the finance committee, the things that we should be discussing there are things that the executive director brings to us for consideration to come to the board. We validate it for fiscal affordability, and then it comes to the board for the decision on the vote. I think there's some confusion of, in these committees, people make decisions, and I think we need to work on getting that out, because it's hurting the culture and reputation of the committees. In fact, there's way too much stuff that's actually talked about by this committee sometimes. Like when it comes to compensation plan, who's doing that? That's a personnel discussion. We shouldn't even talk about that. Somebody should bring us a plan and say, hey, can we afford this in the budget? We look at the numbers, say yes or no. Yep, we give you the green stamp, it's affordable, then you bring it to the board and the board votes. I think that's created some.
Can I just clarify too about on the committees? I didn't think it was that the committee members were voting members necessarily, although if there's something to vote on, they would be the only ones to vote. I thought that the committee members were the only ones who were participating. Everyone else is just listening.
That is correct.
Oh, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. People can comment.
Right, I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
some people
that's
are
technically
misunderstanding
that's
and
what.
misinterpreting that if they
Yeah,
come,
not-
they can
not
contribute
vote.
at
They're the ones who
will.
are-
And I think that, come to listen, but
But
that's time.
Well, like
to work
academic
on.
affairs, we have a lot of people who come,
And
but
they
it's
listen.
only those people who are on the committee list that do the discussion.
And I think
I even had an eyebrow
Yeah.
raise because a lady tried to, I
Yeah.
was like, this is the
Yeah.
committee.
And we also need to remember that by open meeting law, we're required that those things be open.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, but I just think it's really important that people understand that if you come, you're coming to be informed, and that you can have offline conversations about that, but the committees are about doing work, right?
Of
And
this
so-
board.
Yeah, of this board, and so they need to be able to talk among themselves and not be sort of, I think part of it is there's an agenda, and there's all of these things that need to happen in each committee meeting, and we don't want to get off track with,
We don't need to fully vet every single thing, that
Right.
just with the committee,
Right.
back with the full board.
Right, exactly.
We are trusting that committee
Exactly.
is vetting, whether they have to send the ED back to get more data or whatever, but by the time you bring it, and if you guys are saying this is what we're recommending, that we feel it has been,
we need to know
properly.
who are the people who are recommending that, who are the people who are getting.
Or else we all gotta go to every meeting.
See, that's why I brought up Nikki actually, because I moved on from when I go to the finance committee meeting.
I never did.
She's never been to any of them that I've been to.
But it wasn't that required though? I mean, I
So
put that down.
that's why I was saying, somebody like Nikki, because whoever, it doesn't matter to me, but somebody has, and
Are
Rodney's
you saying to
right.
put him as a member for?
Well, I'm just saying somebody,
Secondary person.
Oh, well, I had just put Dave on there because he especially reached out and said.
they've checked out most of the time,
Okay,
unless we call
I don't
him
think that
in.
that's an appropriate thing to say in the.
Well, I mean, check out in the
about-
finance meeting. No, he hasn't.
Okay.
Well,
Check out.
no, wait, so be clear.
He comes when we ask him to. No, it's very appropriate.
So I reached out to Dave because he had the longest history on there. He said that was the area he would like to stay most engaged in.
Because he's on facility. I'm not debating
Oh.
this.
Oh.
This ain't a debate with me, I'm telling you. I'm just saying, I got calls this summer saying I may step away from treasury position. If they do that, you have to have somebody that's able to step in. So Benji, I'm just saying Benji, you believe I told him then I didn't want to do it. Okay.
I tend to agree,
That's fine.
especially for succession planning.
That's what I'm saying. You have to look at
If
future,
you have another board member.
Whoever.
there.
That's fine. Yeah, so Benji, all right, so I'll reach out to Benji too. I know Benji had some concerns about how many committees.
I thought you had asked him, and
Well, he was just saying he was kind of concerned about how many committees he could be on.
and Dave comes when we ask him.
But I think what you're meaning is Dave is a member by virtue of
That's
being
right.
on the facility.
Well, so just to be clear now,
That's-
I'm saying,
No, but I think
that's
it's
stopped.
changing.
That's not,
Yeah.
that's not effective anymore. I mean, the committees that stand alone and standing committees that need to have any membership, people don't really need to be members of the committees just for the sake of, because it was an ad
I
hoc
wasn't
committee.
talking related to the committee there, I was talking about related to status on the board.
Yes.
We were talking about two different things, we're talking about past each other here, so.
So I'm sorry, Dave, can you say again, because I don't know that I understood what you were saying.
What, I can't even think of my words tonight. What is it by virtue of, what do we call it?
Ex officio.
Ex officio, he's an ex officio member.
That's right.
Not on every single committee.
That doesn't, that, I'm talking about just as the board member, and that goes back to the root of the discussion, that there needed to be another full board member on that committee, which we've agreed to, I guess somewhat, as a succession planning in case someone were to step away.
Found in the lottery.
So do you want to table
Okay, so
that to?
that's the part where I didn't understand what the impetus was behind what you were saying.
Yeah,
So that makes perfect sense. So what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, I want us to talk about roles, not people. When I'm talking about, like, I want us to talk about, if we're saying that every board, every committee should have two board members, that's different than talking about a particular people who are already involved, because I think we need to talk about structure. That's what we're doing here, is we're trying to make the structure consistent. And so that was where you and I weren't.
Well, then we have to, people
Yeah.
have to get
Step
on
up.
board some more
Yeah.
committees, because
Well-
Michelle's the only one on board development. Oh, you're on,
So nobody, the direction I was given was nobody said it had to be two acting board members.
that was true. We
I
never,
went
we
over
did
to
not say
the
that.
most experienced there to ask them if they.
I think
They said
I think
yes.
it's a great idea. But what I'm saying is, I think we need to talk about the structure, and so if we're saying from now on that we need to have two board members in addition to the chair, in addition to ex officio, then I think we just need to make sure that we're talking about structure of the committee makeup, not necessarily the people who are currently in those roles.
Well, I think that was an executive committee discussion. We
Yeah.
said we needed to start putting the roles, so we can, I don't think that was in.
And we can certainly change, our bylaws only say, that hold on, I'm sorry.
It doesn't say for membership makeup, I believe.
No, it says that, the appointments shall be made annually by the chair. Yeah, that's, hold on. Members of the committee shall be members of the board of directors, subject to condition the bylaws. Additional committee members may be appointed and need not be members of the board of directors. So,
Yeah.
that's all it's saying.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that's fine. I'll go back on this.
Okay, so we're just making a,
Well, I mean, if you want to put it on hold, I mean, I'll go ask them and see what people say. I get thought.
You can leave it open, until whenever.
yeah, we can go
I
in.
mean, you don't have to until, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Don't you think it'd be a good idea if we just had all the committee lists at one time and
Well, this is, everybody else is put
This
this
is the
in.
last one.
okay, so everybody's got a list?
Yeah.
But it would be nice to have that list.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So in fact, what we talked about was once we get these approved, we need to put them on the web, we need to put them online and we need to put them on our committee meetings on if people want to come. Look, a lot of this goes away, look, let's be honest. A lot of these challenges go away if we get some more transparency and openness about what meetings are when, what's being discussed, what decisions are being made, who's making them. A lot of that above the line stuff that we get challenged with goes away. So that's how, the committee I chair, that's how it's going to be run. It'll be documented, it'll be open, anybody can come, the minutes will be taken, they'll be presented to the board. We do have another discussion that needs to be decided about. We talked about this, was this only being required for standing committees? Or we never informed, Robbie for ad
It
hoc?
was only standing
Okay.
within the bylaws.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just compared this to him.
Yeah.
We never said it.
We had this last year, by the way, I found it when I was looking for that slideshow.
Which one?
We had it of committees.
Oh, yeah.
Last
I'm talking about
year.
membership.
But that may be, where, do you want facilities to be a standing committee? Because now's the time to think about that.
Well, I mean, that was the comments I was going to give into the bylaws, which we will have to come back and discuss anyway. So
Okay.
I was just signaling forward that openly, I think it needs to be. Because it creates, not purposely, it creates a weird scenario where in a meeting where you're just supposed to be looking objectively across the finances, it's hard because where is the representation from like academics or any of these other areas? They're not in there at the time of the discussion. So it's just hard. I mean, we wanted to make some
They
decisions.
don't have to necessarily be in there, because I'm just gonna use what I have to do with my board of trustees. The education committee meets then. If I have a
That's what I'm
proposal,
getting
I
at.
go and present, but I don't go to every education.
Yeah, but sometimes just by virtue of the other committee's representation being there, sometimes that goes on the thing and the other people would not. I mean, it's just like academic affairs, right? Yeah, I mean, academic affairs, we talked about it. It's like, hey, we want to make some of these decisions around here, but they don't have the data for us, right? I mean, there's priorities. So I'm just trying to put some structure in place so that we're more systematic about how we do it. And people know, if you want to put something on the table, first it needs to come from the executive director, right?
Right. And is that
That's a
hard
challenge.
with that one person having to go to so many?
They don't have to come, but whoever they send as a representative needs to represent that. That's one of the things I'm going to push on really hard. These things that are coming forward, they need to come from the executive director. They're
Yeah.
coming from way too many
And
places.
it
and way
seems
too
like
many
they're
people.
different competing.
They are. No,
agendas,
they absolutely are.
depending on who presents.
So,
Okay, so what
Thank
are
you.
we,
So I guess we're voting on this with the addition of another full board member, not an ex officio, is one of the membership things. And then we need to make sure we don't get above the minimal. No, we won't. We want to make sure we don't get above the minimal.
okay, do we have an active motion?
So the motion is
You made it.
these folks,
I can't make it up. I understand. So I can't make it up.
You can present the additional present.
Oh, I just-
we're not gonna name it.
Motion.
Still want to say,
We're just saying, we're approving this with the addition of a second full-time board person as a member. And I'm going to go talk to Angie and see if there's something. Because Robbie's got facilities, he's got athletic oversight, I mean, he's already got. Next time is retreat. All right, good.
Oh, we need to make.
Make a motion.
I make a motion. As
To accept this?
to accept what he presented with this additional change of a full board member versus a ex officio.
Any further discussion?
but David's still in there.
No. All in
In
favor?
addition to it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Yes, facilities is under finance.
Okay, so it's been very nice working with Mr. Betterton on this. We had campus safety, our officer, we had Josh involved and several others, administrators, to look at maintaining a high level of safety for our students. So with some guidance, Mr. Betterton recommended we start this on the 11th. What it does, we were seeing several situations that over the long term could have caused issues as far as students and traffic flows. So we wanted to prevent that at all costs. So we're going to implement a new pattern starting the 11th where that there's no, hopefully, cars crossing. The students, as you see, staff and student parking are separated so that they're not trying to park while cars are coming by and all of that stuff. So we're going to shoot this on the 11th. We're going to have people here, plenty of representation to try to help make sure this goes over smooth. One-way traffic, everyone's following the traffic patterns, and we think it's going to be a good move.
So you have this only, you only have one conflict here, basically, right here at,
Just the green. The morning call.
I'm looking at it. Okay.
Oh, the afternoon remains the same.
Oh, you're going to do both of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll let you speak to that.
Our thinking was to, rather than piecemeal this, do it as a package.
Okay.
This is a revision for morning and afternoon to make it smoother and safer for everybody. Now, can I guarantee it? No, I can't. But we're going to try this. This is in cooperation with the SRO person. And as he gave input, we also had a student to come and give us some suggestions. I'm very impressed with her. She came and gave her suggestions. So we incorporated that, and I said, we're going to make a change, let's make it one on December the 11th. And we're going to communicate this. We'll send it out by email, is that correct? Out by email. We're going to give them a paper copy, and we're going to do it tomorrow. So they'll have 3 or 4 days to look at this, and we'll talk about it. So that, you know, on the 11th, what I do? Question.
Yeah, a couple. I think this is great. It looks like ultimately that you've got more room for drop-off, which will make it go faster, which I really, really like. I don't have the calendar memorized. Is the 11th during finals?
Finals, exams?
Exams.
I don't think so.
It's the week before.
Week before.
So it's the Wednesday before.
Okay, but don't finals start on Friday? They start
Yes.
on Friday, so that gives us 2 days. And depending on what time you have finals, can I just please put out there that there is no way that everybody's going to get to class on time, historically, for at least 2 weeks. When you do a new carpool, there, and so I think we need to consider, I don't know, I just am remembering my child telling me that exams start on Friday, I don't know what time of day, but I think A, consider what time of day you're starting high school finals, and B, you have sporadic teachers who enforce tardies and who don't. And when you have a child who is in a classroom where that's being enforced and that his or her friends aren't, it's not being enforced, I think there needs to be a time period that is communicated to the teachers, and my recommendation would be to stakeholders like parents and students about how long we expect it to take before we can get everybody that, you know, conceivably into the classroom on time, so that you're not having some students get tardies and others not. And I know that's a little more. But as a parent, I'm just asking.
No, that's good.
But I love that. I love this, and I'm so. Am I reading this right? That there's not going to be any parking in that back row?
That's correct.
Okay. Good.
So
We have enough?
not only from a safety perspective, I've had a lot of parents in the United States every year that know you're looking out for something. We're trying to talk about nicks and bangs and vehicles and their kids and insurance and stuff. So I think this is going to be a positive to our parents.
Will this be just morning or morning and afternoon?
There are 2 sheets. One is morning,
So
one is
the
afternoon.
second is the afternoon.
That's
So
correct.
will we be able to have ingress and egress off of Booker Dairy Road?
Why are they different?
That's painful.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask that too. I was like, oh, it's gonna be open from Booker Dairy. By the 11th.
The way I understand it, they only want you to come out and turn right.
Correct.
The SRO checked with the construction people today, Booker Dairy will be open by the 11th.
Yes.
Our exit will be open as well. For ingress for the mornings, not morning, sorry, ingress for the afternoons, that is just for the carpool vans, for the van pool, the big buses and stuff. They're the only ones who will be coming in that entrance. Everyone else is going to continue to use the back entrance here. In
Oh,
the
so
morning,
you're going out the
Exit.
front.
the exit will be,
Oh, you can't.
Officer Cook and I both discussed this, you can exit. When you exit this way, you can only turn right. If you want to turn left, you're going to have to come out and go out of the light.
Okay. So,
But, so, back to your point.
Okay, so when
You're
you-
thinking that we need to delay the implementation of this?
I think that can be a discussion that you all have, whether you delay it until second semester, the start of second semester or not, since you're so close to that time period anyway. And typically, again, speaking as a parent, even when you don't change carpool, second semester, we seem to have a week or so where it's like everybody forgot how to do carpool. So it might make more sense to wait and do it when we come back, simply because you're not going to be interfering with finals, which, you know, does make me nervous.
I wasn't aware of the finals being
Yeah.
Friday.
Also gives people a chance to get used to the road, because the whole traffic pattern, it starts settling in. I gotta imagine that you open up the, whatever Kelly Drive back out, that signal goes on, whatever. But that would all happen at one time, and it gives a chance for that, people to get used to it. Well, I can't.
I would suggest coming like the second week in January or the third week, because you want parents back in. You wouldn't want to start at January 2nd or whatever the first day back in school. You wouldn't want that. But second or third week of January, if that's what you want to do, that's fine with me.
You guys make the
Yeah, I
decision,
think
which you
you
think you
all-
can manage. I think
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
But thank you for that input.
Yeah.
I think
guess
ultimately
maybe
you decide.
when it's announced, or as it's being announced, just making sure teachers understand or are mindful of the fact that when there is a change in carpool, that despite leaving their home 45 minutes in advance for a 15-minute drive, your child still might be late.
Yes, exactly. That was exactly my.
When you have, yeah.
Yeah.
So the teachers are just mindful about that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it.
Okay.
How about I
Get
love
that
the safety
squared away.
stuff? I think that's great.
Remind me,
So one other thing, a couple other things. Josh is going to be working on a fence over here to help security fence a little more. We still got people walking in from the church area, and that is kind of an open area there, so he's going to install that himself.
who?
Josh,
What's he installing?
facility fence.
Okay.
And that's kind of a no-walk zone over there anyway, and we still have people dropping off in the church and all that.
Where are people stationed on the map? I didn't know if you could vary.
She said where it is.
Where they stationed, like where
will they be?
Oh, where, yeah, where will they be stationed?
So just say,
At critical points, I think we listed about 4 or 5 stations around. You want to make sure that the carpool line continues to flow. You won't have people stopping midway to drop off. So we've got, and I think it's 4 or 5, I don't have it on here, but about 4 or 5 places along to keep the line flowing.
so just, the email just came out saying it was start December 11th.
Pardon?
An email just came out saying that.
Yeah, they did the call, they did the call thing too, so I think
The
you.
email already went out, so we really can't change the date.
Oh, okay.
Or you'll have to send out another one. that says-
Yeah, you
It's
put it
on.
on.
Now, if the email's going out, let's go with it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Just,
So then that's the conversation with the teachers on.
Yeah, well, I'll
just need
talk
a better
to
period if they give
Mr.
us.
Rinsky to make sure that the high schoolers know. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a couple of sheets in the board packet that I added, and it was just for information only. So Mr. Butterton and the group, the team can work, kind of go through that and see where we're at and what our move forward is, that type of thing. A couple of meetings ago, we discussed about the facility and how we move forward, that type of thing. So that question is in there about, from an academic perspective, planning additional permanent temporary facilities, and how we look at that based on our student population, which all of that ties into the academics, the finance, and the spends and all of that too, right?
So this is for who?
This is for information for us that Mr. Betters, I'm trying to share all the information I can with him from a facility aspect, so that, hopefully in January we can make some informed decisions on, when we're looking at enrollment for next year and all that. We're trying to forecast out 6 months or so, because we're having to look at modulars, and when you look at the pricing, if you look at the sheet on the back here that has this is what we're paying for our modulars, on an annual basis, and the lease is up July 14th of next year. So we will have to look at re-upping those leases and what all that entails. Dave is trying to pull me some information on that, exactly what the costs are on, and we can project, Rodney, but hopefully we'll have it by January. But I just want to
You're
make
talking about
this.
just redoing the contract?
Yes, I just want to make us all aware that lease is coming up. It'll probably be, they request a 2-year lease. How that affects us. Right now, everything is working okay. I talked to Josh today, the modulars are good, the units, the heat and air units and all of that is working fine. Normal repairs and all, but there is some age on those, so we need to kind of look at that too. So we are using, if you look at as you go below the line where the costs are written there, we put in there are 8 permanent rooms, and Mr. Betterton, again, this is just for information so that hopefully he can track and say, hey, this is where I foresee us being or where we need to be. On the 3rd floor, it being used for high school. The remainder of this building is being used for middle school, pretty much, and there's a lot of cars being pushed around. So again, just taking a look at that.
And have you seen the new space utilization chart that they put together that shows? Yeah, we need to seriously look at that, because what that shows is that if we move things, we have plenty of room for, we have plenty of room for everything.
Who did that?
Mr. Kaiser actually did it, but
at
you know,
I have seen it.
Yes, correct.
but that has other implications in terms of how that could be implemented. That may be a short-term kind of fix until we maybe are in a better financial position to undertake a major, or we raise money to undertake a major capital campaign. But I had asked.
There's other implications to that.
There's other implications to that plan.
Well, and whenever we looked at it, Mr. Kaiser did show me that probably 6 months ago, so I don't know how that works on space utilization and all exactly. But whenever you look at it, I had the numbers for the 9th through 12th grades here and where our targets were, and actually where we're at for grade level. What I will tell you, Rodney, you asked at the last meeting, like how many were on the waiting list. I didn't do that for each grade. It is in Angie Walker's office. But on the waiting list, like for 12th grade, there was 5 students, and on the 11th grade, there was 16. On the 10th, there was 8, and then 9th grade, there was 5. So if you look at the numbers here, where we're at today, you can, again, look at utilization and where we need to be or where we want to be or what's the vision and how do we share that with our stakeholders is what I'm trying to put out there.
That reminds me back in the day when we were over in another building where we talked about where we're going to do a school within a school, was going to be separate, we're going to be pyramid structure. I mean, we had a lot of those way back.
So what is your process? So you have questions resolved by the board. Is this going to a committee, or what is your process?
So I think this process is just to share this information with Mr. Better, right? And we need to sit down and Dave Neville actually asked me to. He said, just share the information and let's sit down and get a plan together so that in January we can come back and say this is our recommendation.
So these questions don't have to be answered by the board?
No.
Oh, okay.
So again, and I'm probably, I know I'm the newbie in the room, but I'm not sure how all of these fit together. I mean, I get that you're explaining the modular cost, and I get what you're saying about current high school usage. I do think it's really important. The plan that I saw was just drawn up within the last few weeks, so we may be talking about different things.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that's why I asked, because I think it'd be really helpful to take a look at for the board to have that as information as we're also looking, because when we're talking about current high school usage, what I think we talked about a few weeks ago is it's important to me that we look to see whether we're actually utilizing our space in the most efficient way we possibly can before we start, I feel like it's premature to talk about a new building until we know whether we're using what we have in the best possible light, in the best possible way, the most efficient way. So to me, I think in addition to talking about current high school usage, we need to talk about how we might be able to change that based on the space that we currently have. But
I would say on that end, now they are actually shifting second semester electives and classes around now based on lack of resources.
well,
And the other thing I'll say this is
Resources meaning a space?
spacing.
well, I think if we look at the possibilities of when right now what we're doing, my understanding is that we're moving pieces within what already exists. And what we're talking about is stepping back. When you do a space utilization, you step back and you look at all of the space and you start from scratch, which I don't think we're doing for second semester. But it's one of the things that I think if we look at it from a holistic perspective and kind of, if none of these rooms were already assigned, could we assign them all differently and make it work better? And there are a lot of other potential issues at hand, but I do think that whether we talk about another building or not, I don't think that we're using the buildings that we have in the most efficient way possible.
And we don't need to be offering classes that we don't have space and resources for.
Well, and that's,
Because
Well, I think that's the multi-dimensional part of the conversation that Mr. Redick needs to have.
well, and they're already talking, they've already got a committee that's working on that.
Well, I haven't been part of that yet. I will say that I think what the role of this board needs is when we have done our work and research with the high school folks primarily, and then, of course, all the others as well, to find out what their needs are, and then come back to this board with our recommendations. But this board also needs to look at where do you want this school to go? Do you want to maintain 40 students at high school, or do you want to grow to 80, or exactly where you want to go? And then plan down the road, 5 years from now, this is what we want to do. 10 years from down the road, this is what we want to have. Now, you're not locked into that. We know things change. But this is your plan. You've got a plan. Right now, I don't see that. I think I need to go back to my high school folks, to my middle school folks, and to my elementary folks, and find out. And then from you folks, I need to know, what is your plan for this school in terms of enrollment? Are you planning to stay where you are? Are you planning to grow? Do you want to, the kids, you have probably, what, a couple hundred kids in first and second grade? Do you plan for them to stay here? Do you want them to stay here?
But I think,
All of those are good questions, and we even need to look at what is in our charter, which is definitely completely different than expansion, because parents have talked about, you promised us small classes, and now you're trying to max out. So I think that's important. Those are all important questions to say what is our commitment to, and
Okay,
then
it goes
make sure our
back to-
charter supports that.
It goes back to strategic planning also.
Yes.
Because it lends itself to students not being successful and teachers not being successful when they're pushing parts around.
And most especially, we've talked before, and I've always said we need an enrollment management strategy because we are ADM dependent, and then looking more at the demographics and the shifting changes in educational and even delivery methods. Do you need a whole new building when half the kids want to be online and sit in their house and do their work? So I think all those pieces is why sometimes you have a broad-based strategic planning committee, because people are bringing different pots of information to you that you can consider. We got one person.
Yeah.
One person right now.
I can be broad-based.
Hey, so technical questions on the buildings. I'm interested in knowing, like, for instance, one of your questions, I think you kind of called this question thinking that about the lease, continuing the lease, which we've got to lease it for next year no matter what we did. You know, we got to lease it for next year no matter if we did something, a miracle. And they're giving us 1-year leases, right? Are they? So that's part of the issue, 1 versus 2. So that's a good issue. But the other thing is, how much did we say it would cost to pull these up?
trust me, you don't know. I mean, Dave says to get them all up at $200,000.
Okay, well, I'm wondering here, do we ever approach the point, and these are like 10 years old, right? Or older. Do we ever approach Vanguard and look to try to buy these units? And because if you think about how much it costs us to move them, would we be better off to buy them straight out? And then when it came time to move them, deal with somebody as a contractor and say, you can have the trailer if you move it, or surplus it or something like that.
Not a crazy idea, actually.
I'm just
I mean,
thinking about
it's,
it.
I thought there there was something before what Dave said, so basically we just purchased it.
When I was at,
Well, he's saying
when I was
that
at,
cost
when I was at
used to be-
DOT, we had a modular unit, we stayed in it for 10 or 15 years, and we paid for it every month. So we finally
The
went
question
to.
is
we
the
wanna
premium
buy
you
it.
pay to buy
We
it,
did.
does it offset the cost of lease? No, I mean.
Well, and then what you do, what they're getting out of is the maintenance. And then we can control the maintenance to a certain point ourselves too. So I'd be interested in looking at that.
Yeah,
So
well,
we
yeah.
can look at that. I do think one of the questions truly that is concerning is about the number of students. So we need to make that decision. I had a parent, the reason I put that together a little bit was a parent approached me and said, we were supposed to run a full-scale high school. This is the first K through 12 class, and that's why I kind of put that scenario in there, which is, I want to know also. So whenever, I've got a ninth grader, is there going to be 75 kids in her graduating class, or is it going to be 40? And then the same thing with sixth graders, so are we maintaining? So we need to make some of those decisions. I don't know exactly what's in the charter. They were saying it's in the charter would be a full-scale high school. I don't know what that means.
Well, and I think
I'm
you're
talking
on the right
about
track.
I know.
Well, I think you're on the right track with asking questions. So to me, these numbers don't tell me anything because I don't know why the numbers have gone down,
That's
right? So I think we need to be, and by we, I don't necessarily mean the board. But I just mean, I think we need to be doing a needs assessment, but also figuring out why the numbers are going down and what's causing that, and whether, and then, once we know that, do we change those things so that our numbers come back up, or are we good where we are?
Stay where you're at, no, stay down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so, like, you know
We
what I
had to
mean?
move forward or go regress.
Right, but I think, I think you're asking a lot of really good questions.
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay.
so,
you're giving me a job.
would that be a presentation, Mr. Betterton, that your administrators be prepared in January? Okay. Or at least
Seems pretty quick.
some more, huh?
I said that seems pretty quick.
I don't,
Over the holiday, yeah, that might.
Yeah, Nikki,
he said yes, I'm the type of person, I'm just gonna ask you, you can feel free to say no, but you said yes.
It's his first meeting, he gets the newbie card now, come on.
I'll get started on it and
And
You'll
give us
let
an
us know.
update.
as fast as I can.
Okay.
One thing you have to remember, when I retired, I used to hear all the time that once you retire, you don't remember when you had time to work, but you stay busy all the time. I understand that now.
Yes.
Because it takes me twice as long to do half as much. I figured that out.
Okay, thank
I
you.
would say, I would say this, just to kind of put this out there. I think as we're looking at spatial utilization and things of that nature, and moving forward, and strategic planning, I would like to see a reevaluation at some point of whether fifth grade should remain in middle school versus in elementary school. And is it truly successful? Is it beneficial for the kids?
So not for us to look at it, but you would.
Right, not us to do it,
Right.
no. I would like to
Yeah.
have that information and hear from administration if it's beneficial, are there issues that are,
I think.
I mean, in theory, that's
mainly
a
because-
below the line implementation point that they need to be able to.
Right, and what I'm
represent.
saying, for them to look at,
Yeah.
we're not taking that on as a task.
No.
But we can bring ideas and
Right.
thoughts and point out landmines, that's part of our job to
and I
our
think,
administrators.
and I think that's an excellent word because I think it is a landmine.
But here, I'm just going to challenge back a little bit, is we had this discussion before, is we have to, as a board, say, which ones are we going to want them the ED to go spend work on to respond to us? Because if we all have a different one,
I'm saying broadly, as we are looking at a strategic plan, as we are looking at space utilization, if that might, I'm just putting the idea out there.
I'm just trying to be cautious, because if we have, everybody's has a different one, they come out of a board meeting, they got 15 to go look at, and I'm like, I may have a different perspective on it. We just, as a board, we've got to be conscious about it.
No, but I also think that, feel free to say, we're tabling that, that's not something we're gonna look at, we're good, I mean, that's the feedback I expect. My whole thing is, once you say yes, I'm assuming you went through whatever process in your mind and you'll take care of it. But you can say no and say, that's something we'll table, that's, with all the stuff we have going on, maybe that's something we can look at if it organically,
Well, Well,
is an
as a-
issue when
as
we
a
do space utilization.
Spatialization facilities, if there is planning as to, or, we're putting all the elementary together, we're putting all the middle together, or how are these, how is that? Anyway, it's a.
Yeah, it's a
goes-
thought, they can pick it up and run with it. They can say that's nothing we're going to, but you have to keep us out of the weeds as much as we have to keep ourselves out of the weeds by, giving us coaching on, we'll handle that. Or a good point, I didn't think about that, like carpool with the tardies. That was a landmine where we would want to give our administration a heads up if nobody else was, going to say anything.
You're exactly right. If you see something, or shoot me an email, and I'll research it and take care of it, one way or the other. It may not be happy, but it'll be taken care of.
Yeah, I'm just cautioning us that history has shown, if we're not careful, we have so many ideas and so many thoughts and opinions, we'll overload you. We'll overload whoever's in that role if we're not careful. I'm not saying you're concerned about valid, Michelle, I just want us to be conscious about it.
Well, what we come back in January may not be a finished product.
Right.
It may be just a skeleton.
Yeah.
That we begin the discussion and spend about 30 minutes talking about it and refining, and then the next month go back and plug away some more.
Okay.
The expectation to come in with a finished product in January,
Oh, no.
I think that's over-expected.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Resource. Okay. Board development.
We don't have one.
Resource is gone, so we need to take it off
Well,
the
no, we
agenda.
never decided. I mean, there was some discussion about whether or not Paul was going to research it or not. But
So we're doing the resource.
remember, the decision we made was that all the fundraising,
There was some need to develop line resource.
that's right, for basically board fundraising, that if somebody was going to chair a committee, to actually have a plan that we as a board would raise money and just give it to the school.
So everyone marinate on that and we need to make a decision on whether we're going to do that or not.
Or we're going to do it this year.
So resource committee is a standing committee in our
It is,
bylaws.
yes, so that's what I'm saying. We need to really decide we're going to have a resource and do something, or
Yeah. And I think it would be good to, if we're talking about the split and what the board is going to be doing as far as some activities, I would say, yes, I'll take that on with the caveat, what I'd like to do is survey the members and find out what we want to do as a board and what the expectation is, rather than going and say, hey, here's some money.
So they've already got a committee to run. So we're about taking on.
yeah, we should have our whole different.
Below that line.
Yeah, that's their thing.
What
Well, I'm
this
just letting
is,
you know, originally some people thought that was a board activity, but the school has got plans to run that, so we're not on the hook.
We need to think of a new board.
but I think the
Well, the
first
prom
thing,
committee stole my idea.
Yes,
I wanted to do a
we can all dress up in our 20s and selfies with the students. Okay, so you're agreeing, and we already have board purpose, and so then you would just need to
He's going to bring his membership.
bring your membership for.
Michelle.
We all need to start. Remember, it's two board members.
I
That's what
got on your committee.
Okay, board
And I
development.
think I'm probably going to be put on another committee in January or February, called the nominating committee.
Yes,
I thought development did that.
Rob, here, you want 2 committees?
I'm sure.
Need some more people. Okay.
We'll fix that in January.
Board development, as we've already talked about, already talks about the bylaws and updating the bylaws, so we won't go over that again. And then at our January meeting, we'll need to make a decision whether we want to open nominations for new board members, and we'll have to vote on that. We don't have to, but if we want to, we'll have to vote on that.
That time already.
Yes.
Tell me about it. Seems like we just finished interviews yesterday.
Okay.
So what's the tenure of a board member?
It's
2
in the
years.
bylaws, it's
2 years for the
years.
initial, and then you serve annually thereafter. I think it's 2 years.
Yeah.
That's what they told me.
Indefinitely?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's
Well,
at
not
the
in
budget
that
annually.
I read that the other day. I think there is a, I don't know.
There's a certain point.
Yeah, but you have to, it's annually, so you start for a period of 2 years, but then after 3 consecutive 2-year terms, it's annually.
Oh, so there's not a term.
There's not a
It's not
term.
term in the traditional sense that in the 5 years, you gotta go no matter what.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not.
It's like, what, Chris Johnson served like 12 years and,
They,
Your date was.
Don't know.
I'm coming up to 10, so somebody better get ready. Just telling you the truth. I counted, but it's 10.
I did have, sorry, this is obviously, but I do want to make one point. I did talk,
I'm sorry, we have to make a determination in January and vote on that,
Whether we're gonna have nominee.
whether we want to open.
And to how many positions?
So we have, there are currently 8 board members, and we, according to our bylaws, we have up to 2 11.
Even think about that, why 11? Well, no, not the, I mean.
11 and not
Well, no, I think that's low.
with all of
11,
the
you
charter
got
school,
11
they
as
get
well.
We've
recognized.
never even been close to 11, so I don't, you know.
We filled out.
I thought we filled out one time.
Yeah, we got there right.
One time.
For one shining moment.
Yeah.
Only a couple
Quickly went
months.
down.
And it only lasted-
Okay, we got a couple of months of y'all running around to these meetings, and then we'll.
One quick one before we go, if we got closed session is, I did talk to Leanne Carr, which is the second in command with DPI from the Office of Finance. Had a good conversation with her. What basically she said was, the money that we have in reserve, she said it's local money, we can use that money however we want, as long as we approve it at the board, we document it, et cetera. Jay Sharp said the exact same thing as our auditor. The one thing that Leanne said to say, which is a little bit of a complication, is that if you have and I asked her to send me this in writing, but it just is, if you have a federal program that you're going to go get federal money for, a lot of times those federal grants are to supplement a program you run. So if you were to happen to want to use your money for, say, some special reading program, and then you're going to come back and want to get federal grant money for it, it may make you ineligible. It had to do with federal grant money and what that, it can supplement.
It's supplanting money.
Exactly, that's the word she used. It was supplanting. So that was the only kind of thing she hesitated a little bit by just saying, you know.
You've got to write your grant
That's
applications
what-
carefully.
so one thing though before we go away from it, because athletic oversight has been meeting every 2 weeks, and Nikki, Dr. Sportslander, and Gail and myself have been trying to put some format to that group. The one thing we have been looking at, and this is something we circled the wagon on a lot, is the eligibility requirements. So we have a board document that says this is what athletes have to meet to be eligible. There's also a county document that has just recently come out. And there's also, of course, DPI instruction says this is what you have to meet. So nothing to present right now on that, but Nikki was very involved in that. And we're taking a look at it to make sure that there's some alignment. And I'm sure there is.
Alignment, you mean between news and these other organizations or within news?
Within this.
Okay.
So,
Between middle school and high school?
that's right, that's right.
And was that, is academic eligibility a board policy? I thought that was a school policy.
There,
Board policy. That's policy.
yes,
No,
this
yeah, but there's school
January.
policy and there's board policy.
No, this is board policy.
is,
So I'm going to use that as an example.
Yeah.
To me, we need to rescind that.
yes.
And
Make it
that
school
is the
policy.
executive director's decisions to run that in the school. Like,
And that's what Nikki was saying even from the past. I don't know.
Why is it?
Well, athletic eligibility is something that you don't want to put on the executive director or just the operation of the school. That really is policy. It can get you in a lot of trouble in terms of parent relations. I think what you want to do is have the school generate a proposed policy, bring it to the board, let the board review it, and then thumbs up or thumbs down. And then you carry it out according to board policy.
Well,
Well, because we have two, school policy, they can change and